The sacking of Gordhan comes 4 days after being recalled from his trip to London. This was meant to be an investor roadshow. President Jacob Zuma believed that Gordhan went to London to meet individuals to overthrow the state.
I've decided to make changes to the national executive in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness. The changes bring some younger MPs and women into the national executive in order to benefit from their energy, experience, and expertise. I have directed the new ministers and deputy ministers to work tirelessly with their colleagues to bring about radical socio-economic transformation and to ensure that the promise of a better life for the poor and the working class becomes a reality.
Briefing, the former minister did not take the sacking lying down, and he described the source of his firing, the intelligence report, as nonsense.
This is the so-called intelligence report. This is the so-called intelligence report which said that, amongst others, the two of us and the Director General are involved in this massive conspiracy to undermine the economy of this country. And if you read this, this is absolute nonsense. This is not the basis upon which you fire, inverted commas, or release from their responsibilities, which are a more polite way, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, of saying it, a Minister of Finance and a Deputy Minister of Finance. So yes, we all had it, and it's circulating quite widely in the country at the moment.
Meanwhile, the Deputy President says President Zuma's sacking of Gordhan was based on what he calls a frivolous intelligence report.
A consultation, because he came with a ready-made list. And I raised my concern and objection on the removal of the Minister of Finance, largely because he was being removed based on an intelligence report that I believe had unsubstantiated allegations about the Minister of Finance and his deputy going to London to mobilize financial markets against our country. Now that I find totally unacceptable, that a person who has served our country with such distinction would do something like that. My strong objection to the removal of the Minister of Finance and his deputy is being based on spurious allegations, and that is the basis of my objection. And I told the President so, that I would not agree with him on his reasoning to remove the Minister of Finance. And I told him that this I would articulate publicly.
The Secretary General is questioning the decision, which he says they could not influence because there was no consultation.
The list that came last night, there was no discussion. It was a list that was developed, somewhere brought and given to us. We're basically informed. So that is what it is. And if you can't influence a decision, that is not consultation. Those are members of the ANC appointed to the cabinet. They have nothing against them individually. Putting them to cabinet and removing some of the performing ministers and not touch some of the non-performing ministers is an issue that the ANC is raising. And the space to influence that decision was totally closed, and the constitutional prerogative of the Constitution of the Republic for the President to appoint ministers was actually invoked.
He welcomes the decision and says the deployment of Gigaba as finance minister will do the country proud.
with the deployment of Malusi Gigaba as the Minister of Finance. It is what we've been calling for as the ANC Youth League, that we must see a younger generation in order to add radicalism in the issue of economic development. Treasury is entrusted with a lot when it comes to economic development of this country, and we believe that a leader like Malusi Gigaba on issues of finance will actually do the country very proud.
The former Minister of Finance says he will meet with his successor Malusi Gigaba early next week to formally hand over the reins. Lehana Tsotetsi, SABC.